You see, when it comes to the Grand Canyon, if you already believe in billions of years and these layers were laid down over millions of years and you believe there's always death here, you're looking through the lens of secular history. You see the canyon as a result of millions of years of processes. But you look through the lens of Scripture, and when I go out there with my children, I say, but these layers have dead things in them. They couldn't have been laid down before sin. And the Bible talks about a global flood. And if there was a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. And you know what you find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. And by the way, when you go to the Grand Canyon, what do you notice? You go up, don't you? Up on the Kaibab Plateau. At the end of the flood, Psalm 104 seems to indicate how did God end the flood? Raised the mountains, lowered the ocean basins where the water poured off into the ocean basins. In fact, if you leveled out all the mountains today in the ocean basins, there's enough water to cover to a depth of almost 2 miles. See, when people say there's not enough water to cover the earth for the flood, there's not enough water in today's world to cover today's world as you see it. But there are fossils, marine fossils on the top of Mount Everest. Mount Everest didn't exist before the flood. They've been raised up. And you know this whole area here, when you look at some of the layers of the Grand Canyon next time you go there, some of the layers are bent. They were still soft when it was bent. It hadn't solidified over millions of years. And at the back of the Grand Canyon, there's evidence there were once big lakes called Hopi Lake and Grand Lake. You see the evidence where the water used to be, probably the leftover water from the flood. And then with all the faulting and the earthquakes that occurred through this area, and with the soft sediments, that dam broke at the end of the flood and gouged out the Grand Canyon. Do you know even evolutionary scientists today are starting to say that the canyon was carved rather quickly by floods, not by the Colorado River over millions of years? They've changed their minds. And if you've been taught otherwise, you need to catch up with the latest in evolutionary geologists. Now, they don't believe in a global flood, and they don't believe in one flood, but they're now saying, some of the leading geologists are saying many floods. I'm saying, how about the consequences of a major flood? By the way, neither of us were there, were we? That's something that I like to teach children about all this. You know, in Job chapter 38 and verse 4, remember what God asked Job? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? You know what I teach children all over the world? When somebody says millions of years ago, put your hand up and say, excuse me, were you there? And the evolutionists come back and say, no, we weren't, but you weren't either. And I say, no, I wasn't, but I know someone who was. Are you interested to hear what he said? Because I have the word of one who's always been there. That's the exciting thing about being a Christian.